It holds the 5th European Award, European Disability Forum. The motto is United in Diversity, the impact of the European Union on the lives of persons with disabilities. And now we have the next panel, chaired by Rosa María Martínez de Codes, a professor of American history at the Complutense University of Madrid, the Vice President of the International Religious Liberty Association in Spain, and Vice President of the European Association of Europeanist Historians, and she's also Vice President of on some other associations, and a member of the Scientific Committee of the Observatory for Religious Pluralism of the Fundación Pluralismo y Convivencia, and a member of the jury of the European Disability Forum grants, a member of the European Academy. And it is a pleasure for us to say that she is the director of the summer courses organized by the Foundation, especially those on the figure of Charles V. And she will be introducing you to Ismael Gómez Talal. And this is the end of today's session. Thank you. Rosa, you have the floor. Good afternoon to you all. This is an immense satisfaction because once again this foundation is doing a miracle. We have a selection of students with brilliant backgrounds, with nice dissertations, and they debate with each other and against each other in a forum without knowing each other. We know them, but they don't know each other, they don't know us, and we have to make the most of these debates. And Ismael Gómez Talal is a young researcher with a very interesting and individualistic profile, very difficult to find, one of a kind. He has a solid academic background, very specialized, because he has studied the Internet of Things, engineering, at the Rey Juan Carlos University, and then in the Carlos III University in Madrid. So he has blended many different topics of research. And then he also is interdisciplinary oriented towards applied social sciences. And this is an extra, how the technology is improving the functionality of the applied sciences, especially in accessibility, public policies, and tourism, or hospitality. If you look at his resume, he has a vast international experience because he has had research stays at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, the University of Aveiro, the Paris-Saclay, Munich, etc. So he has gained experience abroad, which is always important. He has received many grants, mobility, research. And if you would like to make a summary of this varied resume, you can see that he blends social problems, hospitality industry, technologies, and applied sciences, which is something very valuable in the calls for papers and for grants calls. And not all doctoral researchers can work and their dissertations while being part of a research project. it's very rare that your dissertation is accepted in a team of work. But he was likely to have such experience, so he has learned from other researchers and a macro project in Madrid. I'm in Madrid. He works on the technological part of that project, but he can learn from other perspectives, such as the social and the cultural perspectives. In reality, the American Madrid, because you will be talking about accessibility for tourists to American Madrid. And the central pillar in your project is how to improve accessibility for tourists in the American itinerary of the American Madrid, but not just for heritage, but for any type of culture with social implications, symbolic and political implications too. From this point of view, from this methodological point of view, you are using three technological pillars: the public open data for geospatial localization, and then the methods to calculate the accessible routes, and then enhanced reality and gamification.
El tema. So where does accessibility lie? Because this is all technology. Then we have this game of seeing up to what point in public policies we can get with these technologies. And that's what Ismael is going to explain to us. Because the text prioritizes the technological and planning narrative, but there are other developments that probably he doesn't conceive, or he doesn't have to do it because they're not part of his scope. And that is the theoretical frameworks on heritage, memory, and identity, tensions between digitalizing and touristification, and what is the direct voice of the collectives involved. That is indeed a challenge. We're going to give him the floor. The floor is yours, Ismael. Before anything else, thank you very much, Rosa, for your introduction. I don't think I deserve it because it was very detailed, and thank you very much. Thanks everyone. Thanks Juan Carlos. Thank you Miguel Angel, and thanks to the whole USE Foundation, because you made it possible to organize this doctoral meeting between alumni, doctorate students, experts, and we are giving this opportunity to debate, discuss, and introduce our work. Because as Rosa was saying, if we didn't have these spaces, we would be invisible. I also wanted to mention something Juan Carlos mentioned, that thanks for saying during lunchtime that in this space is where Christopher Columbus is where he asked for funding to the Catholic kings, Isabella and Ferdinand. I'm not going to ask for funding here. I'm going to present my work. So it's a paradox or an opportunity, because my work focuses in American Madrid. If Christopher Columbus hadn't asked for funding here to the Catholic kings, I wouldn't be doing my work. What am I going to address in these 43 minutes and 43 seconds? Well, I want to present an idea, an app, a solution on the American Madrid. Because I think that part of heritage is being lost. And if that part of heritage is getting lost, let's imagine what this is for people who have accessibility problem. There's a twofold invisibility. So I want to thank the foundation, but I also want to thank my academic mom and dad. Pilar, Lidia, José Luis Rojo, and Luis Bote from the Juan Carlos University, Rey Juan Carlos University. I'm going to start with a brief introduction. Then I will talk about my project, the AmerMar project, and the reason to carry out the project. The third point is methodology. And I'm sorry, but I am going to address some technological things, but I want to mention the tools used. On the fourth point, I will show a little demo, feasible use of the app. The fifth point are the conclusions, the outcome of my work, and the sixth point is what I want to do after this. Regarding the introduction, I want to start with the idea. Why do I want to carry out this project? Well, it has to do with the invisible heritage. This invisible heritage is connected to the idea of lesser conservation and enjoyment. This means that there are many heritage elements that exist, have been documented, but are not accessible for part of the population. When someone with disability cannot access physically, get or find their way or understand the content of a heritage space, that heritage stops being lived. And there's a consequence. What is not visited is not enjoyed, and what is not enjoyed is not as well preserved. Accessibility is not only about rights, it's also about cultural sustainability. Second, accessibility is connected to social cohesion and quality tourism. When we design accessible environments, we don't only benefit people with disability, we also benefit older people, families, international tourists, or users with temporary needs. This has a direct impact on social cohesion. The third element is technology. This has to do with measurable and auditable decisions. Here it's important to emphasize something. Technology is not an end in itself, it's a means. We use it as a tool to make those data-based decisions that are measurable, traceable, and auditable. This means that accessible routes are not arbitrarily proposed. They are built based on public data, explicit criteria, and reproducible models. Thus, any decision can be explained, assessed, and if necessary, corrected. I want to share a quote. Accessibility is not an extra, it's a democratic standard. This is a fundamental idea. Accessibility should not be something that comes additionally. It's not a privilege for a few. In a democratic society, access to culture, the urban space, and heritage must be guaranteed in equal conditions, on equal conditions, When a cultural itinerary, a museum, a street is not accessible, it is not a problem of the person, it's a problem of the system design. So before delving into the methodology, I would like to give some information about the project. What is AmerMad? AmerMad is the American Madrid project. It's a large-scale project with the purpose of identifying, giving value, and using in an innovative way the cultural, historic, and natural heritage generated by the influence of America in the region of Madrid. It's funded by the region of Madrid, the regional government of Madrid. And what's unique about this project, in my view, is that It's a consortium that includes 9 research groups from 6 universities. The University of Alcalá, the Autonomous University of Madrid, the Charles III University, the Distance University, and the Rey Juan Carlos University, my university. There are 2 collaboration centers, the Superior Council of Scientific Research and the Heritage Institute of Spain. The AmerMath project has 3 main pillars. The first one is to identify. Here we talk about identifying, cataloging, and studying the American heritage in Madrid. The second one is to disseminate. The knowledge that is generated doesn't stay in the academic sphere. It has to be translated into accessible, understandable, and attractive contents for citizens. And the third pillar is digital tourism. This pillar connects research directly to the dissemination in the territory through the design of digital tourist products. The work that I'm presenting is part of this framework, and it aims at providing a specific layer of accessibility, public data, and artificial intelligence. In order to understand the relevance of the project, I would like to share some facts. First, on a European scale, there are over 80 million people with disability. Different studies show that over 70 of these people can afford traveling whenever the conditions are adequate, whenever there are adequate conditions in place. If we move to the national context, according to the National Statistics Institute, there are 1.94 million people between 16 and 60 years of age with a recognized level of disability. And regionally, in the region of Madrid, we're talking about 206,733 people who have some level of recognized disability. This means around 4.5% of the active population in the region. That is, we're not talking about something exceptional, we're talking about something structural. This leads us to the invisibility paradox that I want to share with you. Often we think that heritage disappears when it deteriorates physically, but in reality it starts disappearing much earlier. It disappears when it is not seen, when it is not traveled, and it is not integrated in the daily lives of citizens. And this affects more intensely people with disability. If it's not seen and it's not accessed, it is not protected. And I think this quote resumes this paradox very well. What is not visited does not create a social binding, and what does not create this social binding is not considered a priority for conservation. In the case of American Madrid, this invisibility is twofold, because part of this heritage is not well known, and then if additionally it is not accessible, all of this is outside of the cultural and tourist circuit. Now, let's talk about methodology. Point 3. What I call here from heritage to accessible routes brings us to a question. How can we move to this heritage to an accessible route? The first thing is to design accessible routes of this American Madrid. The second thing is using public data and verifiable criteria. In this case, what we did was to look for data from the town council in Madrid. And the third element is to use replicable tools, open access or open code tools. For example, Streamlinks is what I use for this project. And we are using this in the region of Madrid, but it can be extrapolated to other regions. This is an open code tool, so it can be replicated and reproduced. In the MVP, I will elaborate in further detail. Here we have the points of interest in green. Here we have what we defined in the AmerMath project as the points of interest of American Madrid, and then we have in blue we have the route. It was created with the public data of the Town Council of Madrid, where refurbishment has been carried out. The Town Council of Madrid published data of areas, streets, where accessibility works have been carried out, and this route calculation was done forcing itineraries using these streets. On the right, we have the percentage of accessibility as score to be able to determine whether it's more or less accessible. And then we have typical data like distance in kilometers or approximate time. Public data. What public data do we use? In principle, all the data we use are free and open. The first one is streets, to connect the different elements. The second one that we used is the geoportal of the Town Council of Madrid that provides heritage information from the AmerMath project. And the second element are overhangs, works, the condition of the pavement, among other information. And the third element are the heritage points of interest. And these are the ones that we imposed. We consider that these are the elements that are to be visited when it comes to the American Madrid. This is the website of the Town Council of Madrid. Public data, transparency and governance. I mean, they can be used for this type of applications or proposals. The methodology, if we summarize it in 5 steps, is as follows. The first is the data feed. The model needs to be populated by this data. The second one is cleaning and digitalization. Usually data come dirty. It's not that they're dirty like they're soiled. It means that not everything is good. We have to filter a little bit. We need to adapt the data to be able to integrate them adequately to our model. The third element is the creation of the route graph. We have to use models like the ones that Google Maps or Waze use, or Uber. These models calculate routes based on streets, but we need to adapt this thinking and considering these pavements or sidewalks that are accessible based on the information of the region of Madrid. And the last element is that this needs to be applicable. The route doesn't only have to be provided, it has to be justified. We have the route with all the steps, but we also want to justify it. We want to generate metrics that give us the information about how accessible the route is or how much it can be adapted. So, okay, I've shared my story, but what does the app do in practice? Everything translates into user experience. First, what does the app do? It recommends a route, but it also provides alternatives. This is important because there is no right or wrong route. The user can compare options and choose one based on their preference. So, what we believe is a key element are the reasons for this decision so that we can choose. Second, we have the simple indicators. That is the distance, the estimated time, the accessibility level, the time. I'm gonna share with you the demo now. Before starting to play it, I want to tell you that here what we have is the map. In green we have the points of interest, and when we scroll through this, we will see the different places. Then on the left we have everything that the user can do. For example, you see the GPS, you have to grant access. The app knows where you are. Otherwise, you can look for an address. You click the origin and the destination, and it calculates a route. But prior to that, we will see that we can set a series of parameters. We zoom in, we see the points of interest, Sajines, the monastery. And when we reach the blue part, we see that if we zoom on each of these elements, we will see what pavements have been refurbished by the town council. As I was saying, let's start with the Plaza de España as the point of departure. Then we type the destination. In this case, it's going to be the History Museum. We can select it manually by clicking point of interest, or we can type it. In blue, we have the areas that the Town Council of Madrid has defined as having been refurbished and therefore accessible. The route should force these streets, even though it's the longest route, to facilitate this trajectory. We have a scroll down menu of points of interest, but we can type any destination as, for example, we can type there History Museum of Madrid, and we see those 2 points as if it were a GPS. We have the origin in red and the destination with a checkered flag, and it needs to coincide with the same point as the History Museum of Madrid. This is how we can adjust the parameters. For example, the maximum slope, the distance of the curve, and route information about the information about the refurbishment, the work done by the Comunidad de Madrid. So here we have this sanction, level 4 sanction, and we see that it's not taking the shorter path, but the one that has been refurbished. 24 minutes here. If we decrease the sanction and we calculate the route, we get the shortest route, because this is working just as Google Maps, that is, it's choosing the shorter path with a low sanction rate. The distance is 1.13 kilometers, and it's much faster, but it's going through 0 accessible streets. Going back to the previous example, if we decrease the penalty or sanction the penalty to 9, we get not the shortest but the most accessible route. Here we have accessible steps, and going back to the previous example, we see 0% accessibility at the score. This score comes from adding a certain type of specificities of the level. If we see from 1,411, and 5,000 score using higher accessibility. I also wanted to include Charles V and Juste in the app, because without this opportunity this wouldn't be possible. Let's reset the route and press the GPS app. If we don't have default permits, we just have to click here on this button, this PC browser. We accept the permits and we get the current location. Up to here, this is the demo. And I am going to share the outcome of this work. The first one has to do with how to move from heritage to public policy. The first conclusion or outcome is that we are moving from heritage considered as an object to heritage considered as public policy. The project makes it possible to turn what used to be an invisible story into accessible experiences that are integrated in an urban space and in the daily life. And the second conclusion has to do with moving from opinion to evidence. The routes are not based on subjective elements, they're based on public data and verifiable data that are also auditable, because we have metrics, ratings, and accessibility percentages that tell us whether it is more or less accessible. The third outcome is accessibility as a standard, not as a specific adaptation. The same city can generate different routes for different profiles, and the system is capable of justifying each decision. I wanted to wrap up with this idea because I think it summarizes the approach of my scope, the approach of my paper, and that is that we can govern accessibility because we can measure it. Often, accessibility has been dealt with as an ethical aspect, but difficult to make operable. We believe that the other way around, when accessibility can be measured, it can be governed and compared. Just as any data-based system, this approach has limitations too that need to be recognized. The first one is the quality of the data. The first limit is that real accessibility is dynamic. There may be street walks, streets that are cut, street furniture, events. The second limitation is the coverage. Not all relevant elements for accessibility have been mapped with the same level of detail. There are data in several streets or areas that we are missing. The third one is field validation. The model must be contrasted systematically with real users, including on-site audits and direct retro feedback. To conclude, I would like to talk about my next works. The first one is to have more profiles and customization. That's a potential new line of research. Not all disabilities need the same call for the same needs. For example, visual fatigue, easy reading, etc. The second element has to do with dynamic updates. We need to have city notices and information in real time. The third element is the integration with digital tourism. Here, we should talk about technologies like augmented reality, in line with what Brigitte was sharing with us, and the immersive experiences, in the field of heritage. I am sharing some references here. This is where I extracted the data for the project and the different libraries used for the app. I want to thank you all for your attention, and once again, thanks to the foundation for giving me the opportunity and giving me the space to share our project, the app. If you have any question, we have some time to discuss, and please don't hesitate to give me whatever feedback you have. Good afternoon again. We have Ismael here with us. His presentation was wonderful. I am going to play the evil witch. I'm not evil, but I am a witch after all. This means that I am going to make questions that come to mind. Questions from my perspective. I'm more historian than a technologist. I'm a historian than a technology expert. I love new technologies. I work with them. I include them in my work. And I really like this effort that you are carrying out in this great project of the region of Madrid. But this said, write down. Your text prioritizes the technological and planning narrative and overlooks other aspects. For example, what are the theoretical frameworks on heritage, memory, and identity? Those three elements are part of the theoretical framework of this work. What are the potential tensions between digitalizing and excluding? Because, as you very well know, there's a risk. Digitalization of accessibility may generate new ways of exclusion, the famous digital gap, technological dependence. Many people are going to be left behind. It's not your fault. This is the technological process leading us to this gap. How can we avoid this itinerary to be used from a tourist perspective that manipulates the historic content? That I am concerned about. Because if we build routes with data that are open on heritage realities, giving a different meaning to the heritage, a meaning that is different to that as we, the people who access this heritage, have, we may run into a problem. That is, let's go to the specific case of study. And I'm going to expand the interpretative questions of this project. How does the accessibility approach transform the step from heritage as an object to heritage as a lived experience? How is it transformed? How does the accessibility that you're proposing with these new technologies, it's a new paradigm of heritage because you're transforming it. Secondly, to what level accessibility stops being a technical addition to become an element of the heritage value? That's one of the most interesting keys in this project, because we can say that people with disability are not just recipients who benefit from the project. They are being part of the change of meaning of the heritage. So here we are facing a new shaping of the concept of cultural reality, and this calls for a solid and robust theoretical framework.
Porque yo quisiera saber cómo.
I would like to know how the experience of migrant communities is going to be included. With how is this going to be connected with the narrative of the historic Madrid. Migrants who arrive in Madrid have their own historic history, and they're going to find routes that may change their heritage perspective. And that's important. Memory. How is memory going to be dealt with? How will colonial, post-colonial, migratory realities going to navigate in this framework? This is a kind of worms. We're talking about working with migrants. It involves migrants. I would say that we have to think whether urban heritage can operate as a device for transnational memory beyond the borders of the nation state. This is another challenge. Connecting the colonial and post-colonial past with contemporary migratory realities is very interesting. But integrating Latin American communities not only as audience but memory subjects, that is indeed a challenge. This is a macro project. I'm sure it can be perfected. There is no doubt. I think all technology strategies that we have, that you are using, are wonderful. And I believe that it can be very interesting for integration and to generate collective memory where there are many points of contact. Because those coming from outside don't provide us with this information. This way of visiting the heritage where they are stakeholders is very interesting to generate this connection. Well, hopefully this project comes to fruition in some years. Well, he's going to write his thesis, but the project is there. And we will hopefully be able to congratulate you for your doctorate thesis. Thank you very much, Rosa. I will now give the floor to the members of the jury. No, you go first. Who wants to take the floor? Who wishes to take the floor? Should I answer? Thank you very much, Rosa, for all your feedback and your contributions, because you are you're an expert in American Madrid. You are very familiar with it, so your questions are really good. Regarding the first element, the digital divide, the digital gap, I absolutely agree. I wanted to reflect this within the limitations. It is possible that this becomes a limitation. That's why I was talking about easy reading, etc. It is possible to estimate routes for people who need accessibility, and the tourism institution of the city of Madrid could provide those accessible routes and provide two different itineraries on paper to break that digital divide. I am proposing this as a mobile app, so that would create a digital gap. Regarding this new paradigm, heritage routes that follow a specific technology, I totally agree, but it's true that at the end of the day, I think that we evolve, and probably we will be able to educate tourists in a way. I come from the hospitality world. In the industry, like 50 years ago, it seemed crazy to move prices of bedrooms, and now we're used to this. We know that we have to book ahead of time for the trip to be cheaper. I think this may be a sort of indoctrination, but we need to educate tourists in this new paradigm. Regarding international, transnational tourism, I absolutely agree with what you are saying. Thank you very much for your contribution. An option is to be able to cooperate. For example, in the case of the Town Council of Madrid, this could be done to implement these routes, these new accessible itineraries, and check, for example, with an A/B test. That is a theory to check MVPs or mobile apps and see whether it makes sense or not. In this case, we're talking about having a control with national and international tourism and see whether these solutions make sense. This is the answer to your questions. So let's open the floor for questions, remarks. Let it flow. Okay, so I'll break the ice. Thank you, Ismael. The topic is very interesting, particularly for me because I come from the world of technology, so we are connected in that. I wanted to ask whether there was any co-creation element with people with disabilities, or if this element or this possibility was considered as part of the plan. In our case, no. This is one of the limitations that we have had. We need to test this with real users, see what the instant feedback is. We need to run tests, and we will need, for example, to cooperate with the Town Council of Madrid to give us this integration opportunity. This is an element that we need to consider. We try to make this auditable, measurable, to include this percentages of accessibility, these scores, but that's as far as we got. Thank you very much. Hello, Ismael. As I told you previously, I think that your research is super interesting because I told you that it's not published yet, but I collaborated with a chapter of a book that was on trying to make hiking paths accessible for people with disability. I'm very interested because what I did was very interesting. You're talking about tourism, I worked on hiking, but it's a very similar idea. I have two questions. The first one, the app is limited? Is it limited to the city of Madrid? Or is it open to more maps? The second one is that percentage of accessibility is measured based on what? Is it criteria that you established? Is it based on any literature? Thank you very much for your questions. Indeed, your project and ours are very much connected. And as I was saying in the beginning, it's open code. To put it plainly, it would be a matter of unplugging the data that I have from the City Hall of Madrid and connecting that to the hiking data, and we could replicate it. That's the purpose, to obtain a model, an app that can be replicated and that can be used in other environments, not only by the regional government of Madrid, but just anywhere. Regarding the score and the criteria, there's a first model that is the route model. In that case, we have a library of route calculation, and then we include that penalty and those criteria to force getting a route that brings us through those accessible streets. Regarding the addition of the score, well, it's based on different metrics and different characteristics of the route. the dimension of the sidewalk, the distance, a series of parameters and values that are added and give you the measurement. Did I answer your question? Thank you very much. Hello, Ismael. First, congratulations, a very interesting topic. I wanted to ask you something. My colleagues already touched upon this. You said that there are different types of disability. What's this taken into consideration? Because it's not the same thing to have someone with a physical disability go through the route, someone on a wheelchair, then someone with a visual impairment. So were those criteria considered? Or what types of disabilities were taken into consideration? Thank you very much. No, in principle, we just consider physical disability.
Una de las limitaciones es poder.
As I was saying in the beginning of the presentation, one of the limitations is to be able to include visual disability. That would involve another calculation. We would have to include it as an exceptional case, and we would need a different score, other penalties.
Thank you.
En primer lugar, enhorabuena.
Well, first of all, congratulations, because it's a perfect research, very applicable, very practical, very useful, in order to make that content accessible. My suggestion as a colleague of you may be to make it more impactful and to get a more positive outcome would be to open the door to the third sector organizations in Madrid to collaborate with you, because at the end of the day those are the entities that work with that kind of topics. I mean, entities working with visual disabilities or motor disabilities and intellectual disabilities, and that would be very useful and could do part of the work field or field work. I mean, thank you for your question. I totally agree with you. What we need is to put it into practice instead of just using it here. We need to get in touch with the Madrid City Council, to the region of Madrid, and to test it, to do a pilot test to see if it makes sense and to plan some accessible roads as an example and to see if they are useful for this particular case. But I totally agree with you. This is one of the transfer points we have to work upon. Thank you. I think Raquel has a question. Thank you, Ismael, for your question and for making it so dynamic. It's a good example and a good visualization. So I guess the points you've marked are already accessible. I mean, the road that has been designed is accessible, otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. And regarding the app you're trying to build, I think it's interesting to include them in the development and then maybe avoid them. I mean, the app is easy. It's great for easy reading. It uses symbols and pictograms. The accessibility tools have been already embedded. Thank you. Thank you for the remark and the question. But yes, of course, it takes into account which routes, which streets are accessible and which aren't. And you can also include, for instance, the size of the curb into the data, but only if it is available in the public data. If that is not available, we cannot calculate it, and we cannot calculate the route. But yes, all the routes are accessible, and the system can also calculate the alternative route. There is no such thing as a perfect route. It depends on the user profile and the person, the people themselves. Thank you. I think somebody else in the panel wanted to add something. Yes, please go ahead. The custodian who is hosting us here. Thank you. Congratulations on your work and your presentation, but as one of the stakeholders here, because I represent what this holy house means, we need to insist on accessibility not being just for people with difficulties. It is good for everyone. We need to be aware and persuaded of that. Otherwise, we will keep getting closer, but not to the point. And I just want to put on the table, based on my experience here, the need for a dialogue and encounter between the parties involved. Because those technical resources that look so promising need to be verified, not just by means of technology or as of their accessibility. They need to be verified based on their use, the use of the buildings, the use of the places, the use of the heritage. As the professor said, it would be interesting to think how we can change the consciousness of memory based on the use of those spaces. Accessibility is very important. The difficulty here lies in, the laws that impose some requirements on the building. But then the technicians have different requirements. But what about the use and the reality and the purpose, life, the life of these buildings? I think we need much more dialogue, not just in the final steps or in the final stages, but in all through the way. Historians, art experts need to know ourselves. Otherwise, there is the conflict when it comes to making a decision. Sometimes it's all about the money, I have to say it. It is done on what can be paid, and those who pay decide. So the criterion, the goal, the purpose is not what is good, but what is possible, and that is dangerous in contexts where tourism is overwhelming. I don't want to make it any more complicated to you, I just wanted to share my view. Yes, I totally agree. We need to include all stakeholders, all the persons involved, if we are to contribute to the feedback and the common project, if we are to be all aligned, both technicians, the researchers, the people from the heritage preservation institutions, politicians, we should all be aligned for a common good. If there is a clash, if we don't agree on any point or item, we should discuss it. Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, please, go ahead. Ismael, I'd like to say something about what Professor Rosa María said previously. It's about the joint dialogue, historic dialogue. This project is American Madrid, but in the history, in the list of participants, I only see Spanish universities, not universities from Latin America. But I think this is a joint history, and they should be that too. This is about a collective memory. Thank you. I'm not sure I can say this, but possibly it's because of limitation of the project itself. Sometimes you cannot include research teams coming from external universities. We can invite them as collaborators, but not as members. And that is maybe the reason why, not because we don't want to collaborate with other international universities. On the contrary, we're always looking for collaborations. I like going, I like doing, I like staying in different universities. We're always collaborating, but there is feedback coming from them. Yes, of course. Miguel Ángel, yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think the perspective is very important, how to give access to that kind of routes to people with disability, with impaired mobility. And this is something we should all have the opportunity to enjoy. I have two questions. I think your research is focused on on a very specific territory because it's funded by the region, the Madrid region. But I'd like to compare this initiative with similar ones in other cities. I'm saying this not just because that comparison would be helpful, but because this type of initiatives would benefit from standardization. Because if we have different projects with the same purpose, and then tourists go into different cities, have to learn how to use different apps or different tools, we're complicating their lives. So I think we should go towards a harmonization and standardization. So it would be interesting for you to see what other cities are doing so that you can create a product that are really accessible, that is really accessible to all, so that people don't have to make an extra effort to use them. The second question, because we have worked on the cultural routes and the cultural heritage, there is a risk of possibly distorting the contents and the objective of the routes themselves by having the possibility of finding an accessible route. You are creating an alternative route instead of using the historic route. So the reality of the suggested route may differ from the original route, the cultural route. I don't know if you took that into account when you're trying to make a route feasible, accessible, or easier. Sometimes people will miss part of the environment, of the context. And one last remark. I think Juan Manuel said something about the existence of apps, in this case not intended to people with disabilities, mobility problems, but sensory disabilities or things like that. For instance, we at the Charles V itineraries, we are developing an application for people with visual impairment. For instance, here in La Vera region, the app enables the person to enjoy being there because it explains the itinerary to the person, but at the same time warns them against possible dangers and risks. So it's adapting the route to people with disabilities instead of finding a more accessible route. That way, the people with disability can enjoy the route itself, the same route, but in a safe way. Thank you, Miguel Ángel. Regarding the first question, the standardization of an app model is in fact advisable. We should standardize and validate one app for the whole national territory, and then it can be customized to different cities. But then the reality makes it very difficult because of the existence of the autonomous regions. Because we have different research lines. If we could all join forces in only one app, it would be more functional, will be more understandable, and more efficient in terms of funding. Instead of having different projects in different autonomous regions. The second point regarding the cultural routes, I don't know if I got your point, but I understand that by offering alternative routes, the traditional route that tourists took wouldn't be the one offered or suggested or proposed to the people with disabilities. But I think it can be customized if you are in any of the points of interest. You can get a customized, a bespoke route. If you have, 16 points of interest, but you only want to visit 5 or 6 of them, can you do that? Can you do a customized? Well, because you might have a limited amount of time. You have a route for 4 days, but you only have 2 days. And I've selected 4 points of interest. So what I meant is that there is not such thing as the right route. You can personalize it for every user. You can choose or plan the route that you want based on your preferences, and the most accessible streets will be proposed, of course. And regarding the differences between apps, I have seen preset apps. They can be customized, and they have been preset the traditional way by manually adding obstacles and points of interest, etc. So it's not standardized in that way. It enables for more customization, and it also enables us to use up-to-date data. If the city of Madrid adds more accessible streets, we could add them to the app, and so it's very adaptable. So in that way it would be automated. It would be automated in the app. You can also include events, for instance, if there is a football game, Real Madrid or Atletico, some streets are closed. So if you do it real time, you can modify the route. For instance, did that reply to your question? Sorry, no microphone. Yeah. So, thank you for your presentation. I know you said that this implementation, this endorsement by the Madrid region could be needed, but have you tried to assess or to validate this app with some people with disability in a small group, a small sample, but you didn't have the chance? Thank you, Christina. No, we didn't have the chance. We want to take that big leap. We want to transfer it. We want to put it into practice. We want feedback. We want to see if it makes sense and then correct it on the go. We want feedback by the users, and I think that's the way. We need to iterate it and improve it little by little, and to make it useful, at least in Madrid or in the whole country. Since we're all based in Madrid, we can work upon it. And one last question, please.
Me parece súper interesante tu proyecto.
Your project looks very interesting, Ismael. I just want to add that an application that would be more participatory would show the territory beyond a plan or a map. It could work on the citizens' experiences. So it would be great for you to determine how the accessibility barriers and obstacles could be identified from attitude point of view, physical obstacle point of view, so that you can track them down. Slopes, ramps, bridges, both the tactile floors, signals, symbols, or even identify indicators on whether people are nice in talking to people with disabilities, or if they show empathy. That would be a great contribution for Madrid and the rest of the world. I think it would be very impactful and applicable. Thank you. Congratulations, and thank you for your contribution and your kind comment. We have included some accessibility indicators, for instance, the road size, slopes, curb size. When you saw the demonstration, some parameters could be adjusted. But as you said, we could also add something else to the itinerary. For instance, if a user has chosen a slope of 20%, we could say where it is, in what specific street, and then add a warning in the route. That would be great, and then as many details as possible. And it will be more useful for the person, the user. Thank you. I've noted it down. Thank you, Ismael, because you took note of all the questions, you replied to all of them. I think everybody's satisfied. And I just want to close this session by checking about something the custodian said. American Madrid opens up different itineraries and different routes, but the basis for all those routes and itineraries are the human parameters. But beware of a change of paradigm or a paradigm shift. You have to be aware of the advice you get and the advisors and the discussions you enter in, it's not about the physical route, it's about the intellectual route, the what's inside. And that is a human factor. You are a technologist and you always look for the best to make that route, those itineraries feasible and easier, but they have to really reflect the history of Spain. Okay, so we are just on time. We started out 20 minutes late and we are closing the session 20 minutes late, so thank you. We are just on time. Let's give a round of applause to Ismael for his presentation and to you all.
Creo que ha sido una jornada muy...
I think it was a fruitful day, and now one last video that summarizes today's sessions. Go ahead.
Como leí. Enhorabuena a nuestros compañeros de comunicación por este trabajo.
Thank you, dear Communication Department, for this rush job.